All right, everybody. Welcome to my first podcast here with my buddy Rick Acco, a real estate agent here in Las Vegas. And I am your lender here in Las Vegas as well as a couple other states. So hello, Rick.
Hello, Daniel.
Thank you for joining me today, bud.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Well, we had some technical difficulties issues this morning, but we are ready to roll. So this podcast is mostly going to be primarily revolving around the real estate market, mortgage loans, guidelines, up-to-date market information on other things, maybe news articles that come out that we have some opinions on. So hopefully some of you guys will actually find this very helpful and useful.
Yeah, and hopefully we can talk about some other things, just real estate market related, and just have a nice little chit chat.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
the whole point of this. So some of the topics we were going to talk about today, that way you guys have an idea, is we're going to be talking about today's market, about whether it's kind of a buyer's or seller's market. We're going to touch a little bit on seller credits and seller concessions for those buyers that will need those in order to get into a home. And a couple other things we want to talk about are about a press release that came out from the White House this week in order to make it easier for home buyers to get into homes. So that being said, let's get started. So I think me and Rick were talking about this a little bit beforehand and a few other times. Right now, Rick, what do you think? Especially here in Vegas, I know that we kind of work mostly here, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be similar just about in any other part of the world or any other state. What kind of market do you think we're in right now?
We're in a fairly even market, probably more on the buyer side,
Okay.
just because of all of the incentives that new home builders and resale sellers are offering potential buyers.
Okay. So because buyers are receiving these, in my opinion, I think, and we were having a conversation, I think we're kind of more in a buyer's market because we're offering so much more. But then you brought up kind of something different that kind of stated that, we are kind of in a buyer's market, but there are specific kinds of homes that would fall kind of more towards the seller market.
Yeah. So with that being said, the price points I think really have an impact on what somebody's purchasing. So it's a really tight market. Before COVID, you could buy a nice house for around 250,000. Now you're looking at 350 to 400 for something that's decent.
Okay.
But between 300 400, it's a really tight market
Okay.
for those buyers, and you may be able to get more concessions out of a seller.
That's true. I feel like people that are actually qualifying. Let's just get on your point, right? You said anywhere between 300 and 400,000. It's a very competitive market, and you may or may not get some concessions depending on the home, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a ready to move in home or maybe it needs a little bit of work. There's a lot more buyers in that price range, so it makes it a little bit more competitive. So in that case, if you have more people able to afford homes in that price range, you're going to have a slightly tougher time maybe getting your offer accepted, especially if it's a home that you have to do absolutely nothing to. But that being said, so let's kind of move over to the seller side or the buyer side. If you are a buyer looking to purchase a home in that price range, and let's just say it isn't perfect, right? You're able to get something called a seller concession. I know I've talked about this before on my other social media platforms. So a seller concession is essentially just the seller offering the buyer or the buyer asking the seller to give them money in forms of a credit at closing. So you can use this cash or this money towards a variety of things. One of those being either to buy down your rate permanently, do a temporary buy down, pay for your closing costs, right? But the only thing you cannot use those seller concessions for is essentially your minimum contribution or something also known as your down payment. So an example of that would be if the house is worth $300,000, you're doing a conventional loan for 3% down, you have to pay at least $9,000 out of your own pocket, and none of that can come from a seller's concession. So I know me and Rick done a few deals actually lately, and for the most part, we've been pretty lucky with getting some seller concessions, right?
Yes. Yeah.
How has that been on your side when it comes to asking for those or you trying to educate your clients on whether or not to do those?
Well, it really depends on the price.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times these sellers have that concession built into the price.
Okay.
And I get it, but it can benefit the buyer
Yeah,
by
absolutely.
having that concession, maybe paying a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
has to appraise for that
Yeah,
price.
that's the important part right there. It's
The most,
definitely the appraisal part,
yeah,
right?
you can run into some issues.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be on the same page with that seller's agent
Okay.
as a buyer's agent.
Okay.
Be on the same page as far as the list price. How are we going to get this deal done?
Mm-hmm.
You really got to have that talk with that other agent. And if you don't have comps, see if they have comps
Okay.
for it. And it can benefit everybody. Get that seller out of the house and get your buyer into a new one.
See, you touched on a couple key points there. Like, I think people kind of don't realize that the seller's agent and the buyer's agent are working together to come together to make that deal work for you, right?
Yes.
But I think the key thing is the fact that you are letting your buyers know that, hey, maybe we have to go a little bit over because this is going to be the best offer you can offer these sellers in order to get into the house. And you're wondering, but why am I going to offer more on a house just to get that money back in a seller concession? Well, there's a few reasons. The first one would be maybe you're a buyer that doesn't have a lot of funds available for yourself in order to get into the house. So you actually need that money or want to use that money to help you cover some of those costs. So you might be a buyer that either just has the down payment or maybe you're using a down payment assistance program because you don't have those funds. And you use those two tools in order to get you into that home for basically almost nothing.
That's right.
I know I've had a few buyers like that where I've only put them into a home for a few $1,000s, right?
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with making an offer higher than the list price
Mm-hmm.
and adding that into your offer where you receive five, $10,000, $15,000
Exactly.
from the seller.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with that. It's all a negotiation.
Well, that's the whole point, right? That's why you have to have a professional help you with that stuff. And then the other reason you would actually do this, and it's another buyer that I actually worked with recently. She was asking me whether it was better to buy the house for cheaper, right, or to get seller concessions. I was like, let's just run the numbers. And we did. I was like, if you do seller concessions, you're going to be paying, I think she paid about $12,000 to $13,000 more for the house, but that's what she got back for seller credits. She was paying $100 to $200 less a month using those seller concessions towards buying down the rate. And she was paying a few $1,000s less out of pocket at the end of it. You know what I
Beautiful.
mean?
It's a
So,
win-win.
exactly. So just because you hear a higher buying price doesn't mean that you're losing. You have to really look at the big picture when it comes to these things. You can't be very narrow-minded or
No. Yeah. Yeah.
short-sighted in a sense.
And realtors too.
It's true. It's true. It's
A lot
true.
of them are so closed off. They don't get the education
Mm-hmm.
about how you can structure a deal,
Exactly.
how you can negotiate on some of these terms.
Exactly. Anyway, so those are kind of some of the best ways to kind of use seller credits, at least in my opinion, or why people should actually be educated on that when they're talking to clients, right?
Yeah. And you know what? Something I wanted to bring up.
Okay.
This price range, it's so tough between 300, 400, that with the interest rates going up
Mm-hmm.
recently, people are now out of looking of what they were looking for specifically.
What do you mean?
Single family home,
Okay.
they can't afford it with the interest rates going up. So
true.
now townhomes and condos,
Yeah.
if they're approved via FHA
Mm-hmm.
to get into,
Mm-hmm.
those prices have gone up because now you can't
Yeah,
get into
it's true.
that $300 to $400,000 house. Now you can, if you have a good lender,
Mm-hmm.
you're pre-approved were pre-approved for 300. Now you can get into a condo. I mean, if you need a home,
Mm-hmm.
there's homes available. May not be what you want, but if you were once approved for that $300,000, now there's other options.
So to touch on that, that's actually a really good point. So while you were talking about that, something just popped in my head. I'm like, the new entry level home isn't necessarily going to be your first home. It feels like.
That's right.
You know what I mean? For a lot of buyers actually, especially in today's market, your first home or your entry level home might actually just be a townhouse or it might be a condo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the benefits of actually getting into something like that right now, it's still yours. You could still do the things you want to do to that home and still build the equity on it. And then in the future, you have multiple options, right? You can always sell it to upgrade. Maybe financially you've changed jobs and you're making more money or whatever. You can hold on to that property and start renting it out. There's a lot of different options when it comes to that. But to segue into kind of our next topic, that's kind of, well, there is a lot of fact in terms of it's a bit harder to get into an entry level home right now with the way prices have been going with home prices and kind of where interest rates are. To talk about that White House press release that they did today,
Yeah.
or not today, this past week. So if you guys haven't read it, the White House actually put out a press release earlier this week. I believe it was Tuesday. And they're actually changing their rules for FHA when it comes to ADU units, which is an access dwelling unit. I'll let Rick kind of mention what that is since you're the real estate
Well, it's
professional.
basically a casita type
Okay, yeah.
situation where you can put the mother-in-law, instead of having like a mother-in-law suite, it's actually something more separate, and they have to have their own entry exit.
Exactly. Their own entry exit. They have to have it has to be livable and for somebody to live there without having to actually use the main house, right? So I know that this isn't necessarily ideal for a lot of people, but having, well, the changes are, let's just start off with that. The changes are that with an ADU now you can actually use the future rents for an ADU unit in order to help you qualify. So let's say, for example, let's just say you're looking at a home and that house actually has a casita in the back that you can have somebody living there, whether that's a family member or somebody completely different. You can have that included in your income in order to qualify you for that property.
Yeah.
All right.
Very cool.
And one of the cool things is I was actually talking to my underwriter, and I think we were trying. I was really really intrigued by this. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was really hyped up about this. That I started asking a lot more questions, and they have something similar like this for conventional loans already, except you have to actually have rental history. With the FHA version of it, you don't have to have any rental history with it.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. You can be somebody who's, you know what, I really want to get into this house. Luckily, I have this ADU unit. I can get in. Or maybe you're one of those people that in the future want to become an investor in a home, right?
Yeah.
So this can be like your segue or your new way of getting into that
Yeah.
market.
Airbnbs.
Airbnbs.
Th-
Yep.
That's huge. And the rules are always changing.
Especially here in Vegas.
And something like this would be perfect if somebody wants to be that investor where they can rent out
Exactly.
that casita or mother-in-law suite, whatever, that ADU. So now they can get some income. And the thing is, they're there, so you don't have to have a 6-month lease or a 3-month lease or
Exactly.
1-month lease.
Yep. And then you're not stuck with the necessary long-term renter. Yeah, you have people moving in and out, but it's your entryway into that specific market, right? And one of the good things about it too is the fact that Vegas does have really strict Airbnb rules, right?
Yeah, very
But
strict.
one of the only ways you can actually do it here is if you actually live on the property.
If you live on the property.
An ADU, perfect for it. The other thing about the ADUs is there's other little creative ways, because my lender brain just came on immediately when I said it. Like I said, I called my manager. I started reaching out to underwriters. I did as much research as I could because I was thinking of a lot of creative ways this could be very helpful for the future buyer. And in my opinion, if things kind of stay the way they are, I was talking to somebody else. I think it was you, right? Like it was somebody. I was talking to somebody, and it was actually my friend last night. We went out to go get some food at Subway, and we were talking about it. He's like, "What is this gonna be like the new California where you have a bunch of ADUs?" I go, "To be honest with you, I mean, yeah, like, I guess if prices stay the way they are, and if we keep getting Californians over here, unfortunately, the sad truth, it could be true, and it could be true for a lot of different places, right?"
Yeah, and it brings me up to a point. I saw an article just, I think it was yesterday, where they're talking about the F1 races here in town.
Oh, that's true.
And
It is
people
coming
trying
over.
to rent out their properties for this. And the city or county, whoever's making up the rules for the Airbnb investors, they're dragging their feet.
Are they?
Yeah, so people have no idea of what the constraints are, how to do it, the rules and regulations. So people are going to be missing out on some income during the F1 races.
Dang. Imagine our government actually getting their stuff together at one point, right?
Yeah, imagine that.
All right, no politics here, all right? But, like I said, I think ADUs are a very creative way. Oh, and then, what else? We have, and I guess we talked about this the other day because I brought it up to you. ADUs here in Vegas, yeah, they aren't very common, but they have become an option on some new home builds, right? And then some new home builders are actually offering like a mother-in-law suite or something like that to the unit where it actually is livable for somebody to live on their own, and it has its own entrance, right?
Yeah.
So I think for some of those properties, like if you're looking into it, like it's a great way to do it. And again, you don't have to put a stranger in there.
No, very popular in the Northwest.
Yeah,
Northwest and Cadence.
Is it in Cadence too?
I think I remember seeing something in Cadence.
Okay. And the Northwest, I don't know if you guys know Vegas. For anybody who's listening to this and aren't in Vegas, there are things outside the Strip, FYI. There are homes, there are people, there are families. There are other things to do than gamble and go to the clubs. We're up here in the Northwest area. We're actually really, really, really close to Mount Charleston, which is a really, really nice area. It has some cabin homes, some hiking trails.
It's beautiful up here.
It is very nice.
Higher elevation.
Higher elevation. So during the summer, it's only 70 or 80 degrees up there.
More bang for your buck up here in the Northwest.
Absolutely. I agree. 100%.
For what you get in a home.
Absolutely.
I think.
But I'm also biased. I live in the Northwest. I've always lived in the Northwest when I lived in Vegas. I loved the Northwest. So.
Yeah, I live in the Southwest, and I think you get more bang for your buck, especially on the resale market and on some new homes, a little bit larger lots, but the resale market, especially up here, it's better.
It's
3-car garages, larger lots.
well, you know why though? Come on.
Well,
It's because it's adjacent to Summerlin. And everybody always sells it as, well, if you're right next to Summerlin, it's essentially the next Summerlin. That's, if you hear somebody sales pitch you that, like, no, necessarily it isn't the next Summerlin, but it is really, really, really nice, and you're paying a lot less.
Yeah.
For the same amenities, living in the same city, right? And
No Summerlin master plan.
No Summerlin master plan, and you're only like 10 minutes away from Summerlin on
Yeah.
the freeway, like on a bad day, to be honest with you. Never mind. Anyway, so back to the ADU units. So the other thing is they also changed it where the ADU unit, actually they didn't change it. Something included in the ADU changes is the fact that you can actually use it for the FHA 203K. If you guys don't know what a FHA 203K is, that is essentially FHA's version of a renovation loan. All right. So that means you can get into a home for a certain price, and then after that, they'll give you X amount of money up to a certain point where they feel how much the house could appraise at to that point in a renovation budget. But keep in mind, when we're doing a 203K and we're doing that, the changes, you personally can't make them. It actually has to be done by a contract professional. There's a lot of rules involved with that. So be sure that you talk to your mortgage professional. That way they can go over some of these things with you. It's a little too winded to really go over on a podcast, but it's a great option.
Yeah, to kind of gloss over it, if you're a buyer in that 300 to 400 thousand market, so a lot of those homes, they need upgrades, that they need renovations, may not be move-in ready. This is a great loan for somebody that wants to get in that house. So the renovation loan, it's like, let's say you have a house for $350,000 that you love, but it needs carpet or new flooring or something, roof. It needs roof fixing.
Yep.
So you can get that loan, get $20,000 or whatever it is, and contractors will be hired to make those changes and to make those repairs and renovations.
Absolutely.
So you get into that home in your price range that you love, and make it move-in ready.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah. Well, obviously, so, and everything has to kind of still follow FHA guidelines in terms of being able to be inhabitable and all that other good stuff. Again, very winded thing to go over when it comes to explaining it on here, but it's a great product to use. On top of that, what she didn't mention is you can create a mother-in-law suite or you can create an ADU with this budget, right? And that future rent can actually be used in order for you to qualify for this loan. So there's another way for you to kind of find a home that you like, and maybe it's just slightly out of your budget. Maybe if you talk to your mortgage professional, they can be a little creative in helping you find out how you can get a renter in there and still qualify for this property. It's a little bit different in terms of how much income you can use for those versus an ADU that already exists, but it opens up the options for you as a potential future home buyer.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Another thing that they actually talked about on that thing, let me pull it up really quick because I don't necessarily remember everything off the top of my head.
Where's your notes?
Bro, I'm sorry, guys. I can be a little procrastinative when it comes to these things.
You keep your notes on your phone.
Definitely do that. You're right. Absolutely. There are a few other changes that this press release is going to mention. They want to make a few changes to USDA in terms of how they qualify people for it. They're also going to make changes to the 203K in terms of making it easier for certain renovations to be done. And I don't know if they mentioned something about increasing how much they're going to do it, but there is a limit when it comes to the renovation loan for FHA.
Yeah.
But I thought it was great when I just read that. I know I read it somewhere before. I think I found an article from like April. I forgot where I found that article that had mentioned that it was going to happen. But at that time, it really didn't necessarily click because it didn't make sense.
It's a great option for people. If their budget is up to a certain point, they're pre-approved for that, and they're looking for a home, and all they're running into is homes that are fixer-uppers, so to speak. It's an excellent option.
Yeah. One of the things I do want to point out about this, that way people don't get confused now that I think about it, is this is an ADU unit. That do not to be mistaken for like a duplex, triplex, or quadruplex. This is only for a single family residence that has one of these things. So this house cannot be zoned or be a multifamily unit situation.
Correct.
So that way there's no confusion with any of this. But that being said, let's talk about a little bit on this last topic, I think. I know that over the last few years, we've seen the market do some unconventional things, you know what I mean? We had 2020 where rates were ridiculously low. Around that same time, home prices were just skyrocketing out the roof, you know what I mean? And things were getting a little crazy. And over the past year, I think they've kind of settled down as much as prices have been kind of going up and down. I think with the interest rate hikes from the Fed, the lack of buyers or the lower amount of buyers out there, things have kind of been trying to balance itself out. In your personal opinion, how do you feel the market is doing in terms of home prices? Because I've noticed that when I'm getting the market updates, some people are starting to notice that home prices are being reduced. And when they say home prices are being reduced, they're not talking about the sale price. They're talking about the list price, right?
Well, it's a touchy topic,
Yeah.
but buyers are getting used to this high interest rate period. The average since 1971 or 72 is like 7.7% interest rate since back then. Up until now, I think it's 7.73. But so it's normal. It's kind of a normal market. So people are getting used to this higher interest rate market. Those days of 2 to 3%,
The short-lived days.
they're long gone, man. I wish I would have picked up one of those. But it's okay if you can afford something. If you can afford the payment now, get into that house. You're going to have less competition, and you're going to find the house that you really want.
Yep.
If you can afford it.
Yep.
But as long as your budget is good, or credit's good, go get that house.
And by credit being good, like we could work with a lot of credit. Don't worry about that. But if your income's good and you're good at managing your money because maybe you had some blemishes on your credit for random reasons, we're here to help you on that. But no, you're right. I feel like the market was, there was still an appetite for the market, right? So the lack of inventory still kind of managed to keep prices okay, like about the same as to where they were at their peak. But in all honesty, and if we're being honest, home prices have gone down over the past 9 months to a year since its peak since last year.
Yeah, they've gone down, but
Not to the extreme that everybody.
no, and they're not because there's such low inventory that it's keeping the prices up.
Exactly.
It's keeping our prices afloat because of the lack of inventory. If there was so much inventory, if we had 8 or 9 thousand homes available for sale in Clark County or Southern Nevada here, yeah, you would see probably a bigger lowering of list price, but not with this interest rate.
No, no, I think you're right when people are getting used to this. I'll give you an example. I had a buyer who was waiting, and this wasn't even very long ago. She was like waiting like 2 or 3 months ago. Interest rates, I'm not going to say interest rates on this podcast because I don't want to have to write so many things down at the bottom, but she wanted it at a certain interest rate. She waited a month or two, and all of a sudden she calls me. She's like, I need to buy right now. And I was like, why? She goes, because I made a mistake. I should have bought last 2 months ago, because now her interest rate was higher, right? So her payment was a little bit higher. So that meant she was able to afford a little bit less house. It was her ability to afford a specific house wasn't necessarily the issue. It was the fact that now she had to pay a little bit more, or we had to get creative. And that's where using those seller credits got me to where I needed to get her when it came to making her comfortable with that payment. Fortunately for her, which is kind of actually coincidental, she was actually going to rent out. There was an actual casita on this house.
Wow.
So she's actually going to be renting it out to her parents. She didn't have to use that to qualify. That wasn't the issue, but it's kind of weird that actually did happen. But she got into a home, and it just goes to show that you don't know what the market's going to look like tomorrow. We don't know what the market's going to look like in 4 or 5 years. For all we know, home prices could be stable at where they're at, and this could be the new normal forever, right? And this could be the lower interest rate. What if we start seeing 9-10% interest rates? You know what I mean? With the same market that we're in right now.
You never know, and with what's going on in the world events happening,
Exactly.
Different wars, it's a complex issue.
Yeah, internal politics just within our
And an election
branches.
coming up.
Election year. It's true.
There's such a dynamic.
Yeah. Yep. It's true. It's definitely true. But just my only piece of advice is just make sure that you talk to somebody, right? Make sure you get all the information you need. If you're not even purchasing now, educate yourself on what you need to do. I think, in my opinion, talking to a lender, finding out where you're at is one of the key things.
Finding somebody that you trust.
That's true.
Getting good information.
That's true.
And somebody that's going to tell you the truth.
That's true.
No BS.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a good name for the
No.
podcast. No BS.
No BS. No BS home loans and real estate. That would actually be pretty good.
Yeah, no BS.
We'll work on that a little bit. But
Yeah.
It sounds good. Sounds good so far. All right, guys. But I would think just get into whatever you guys need to in terms of information. Bury yourself in educating yourself on purchasing a home in the future. I hope this was helpful, and I think we touched on every topic we thought we were going to talk about today, right?
Yeah, it was good. It was fun.
Yeah. Well, Rick forgot to bring us our drinks. He was actually going to make us a drink for the opening, and I was going to use that as like a celebration start.
Yes.
Completely threw me off, and he says I didn't take notes.
Nice cocktail recipe that I was going to do, but I have to drive, so I am working. I don't drink and drive or drink and work.
Yeah. Be responsible, guys.
Yeah.
No drinking and driving. I definitely don't condone that.
No,
for
no
sure.
writing offers when you're loose.
I'll buy this house for $1 million.
1 million.
All right, guys. Well, again, I hope this was helpful. We will be doing future podcasts once a week. For the most part, again, we are going to be touching on just any opinions we might have on specific articles, maybe updates. And in the future, just some guidelines and tips and tricks on trying to help you guys get into homes and how you guys can do it without going crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds like fun.
All
Let's
right,
do it.
guys. Well, thank you guys. You guys have a good day, and I hope to see you guys in the future.
Bye.